I don't understand why people don't listen to me, why they choose to cross me, why they have to anger me. What didn't I do for them? I mean, Lalita was my wife. Oh, my beautiful, beautiful Lalita. I still remember the first time I saw her. She looked like an angel as she stood timidly among the whores in my brothel. I had to rescue her. I saved her from the life she would have had as a two-bit whore. I even shielded her from the ungrateful Jagdishwari, my first wife. Lalita was supposed to love me, listen to me. But what did she do? She ran away with that useless fellow, Sudalai. Fell in love, it seems. What is love? It's just lust. I'm smart enough to see through their act, whatever they may think. What about my love? Does no one care about my love? And that pilferer, the man who not only tried to steal my business but also stole my wife? Well, one of my wives, anyway. Scoffed the tall man as he stood watching the burning, crackling fire in front of him. The smell of burning flesh was punctuated by the crackling of the fire, and the man continued his musings. They really thought they could get away with this. I watch over Periyar Nagar like a hawk. Everyone knows who I am in Periyar Nagar. In fact, that idiot wife thief really thought I was making peace with him when I offered him brandy tonight. He drank it all. Of course, I wanted him to think that. It was quite satisfying when I kicked him in the balls. I will forever remember the look on his face as his life left him, as Babu strangled him with that towel. Anna, time to leave, said Mohan. It looks like the heat was getting to his little brother. As the man was walking out of the small, dingy room, his associates closed all the windows and walked out. In a few minutes, there was a loud burst indicating that the stomach had exploded. The unpleasantness with Lalita and Sudalai was over. That'll teach them all. That'll teach them not to cross me. I'm Otto Shankar and I run Periyar Nagar.
Namaste, Namaskaram. Welcome to today's Kuni episode. I'm Sneha, I'm in Hyderabad, and I have with me on Skype Aditi, who is in Patna. Hey Aditi, what's up? What's happening?
Dude, it really feels like we're back in last April, only now instead of quarantining, people are holidaying, going to pubs, and roaming around without masks. Anyway, hi, how are you guys? And how are you, Sneha?
I'm good. Guys, just excuse both our voices today. I'm hungover and she's
Yeah,
sick. So, yeah, just
yes,
for today.
I'm currently awaiting COVID results.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah,
guys.
that too. Yeah, apart from that, I'm good. And since I live with two 80-year-olds at home, I have been banned from going out to party. I can only go to restaurants at odd times where there are a limited number of people. If ever I do go out and come back, I have to take bath before touching anything at home. Yeah, that's a thing. That's a rule in my house.
It's a good rule.
Yeah, do you guys have any rules like that at home that your parents are enforcing? Let us know. Let's all commiserate together. Yeah, and the other day I worked from a pub. I was there from around 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. before the log out crowd, as what it's being called these days, came in. Yeah, that's pretty much my life.
Okay, I still don't approve, and you better not get COVID. We have a shit ton of work to do this year.
Yeah, Aditi, right back at you, brother. So, yeah, thank you for all the love you have for me. It is so heartwarming, okay, to see that you care so much about my well being. But you take care too, and take care of the elders at home as well.
I have to, dude. I can't go running to the Ford Foundation for help with this podcast when you fall sick. I need you to be healthy and hearty, and this podcast needs a lot of work.
Yeah, the context for the Ford Foundation reference is that some Sangi on Instagram actually messaged us and not so nicely suggested that we should apply for funding from the Ford Foundation since we are so fond of left wing propaganda.
That message was the highlight of my day, to be honest. Also, the book isn't going to write itself, right?
Yeah, guys, in case you can't keep up with what's happening, here is the tea. Aditi and I are currently writing a book. We were approached by a true crime book, obviously. We were approached by a prominent publisher like a few months ago. And, now we've gotten down to working on the book. We made this announcement on the Insta Live we did on Cooniversary, but we're not sure if a lot of our listeners were able to join us. So here we are, making our announcement again.
It's all thanks to you guys. So thank you so much for supporting us all this while. So this week, we chose a case which has been requested quite literally since day one of starting this podcast.
So join us today and also next week as we tell you the story of Gauri Shankar, or who was popularly known as Auto Shankar. Remember, we have a Cooney Hall of Fame. So this guy would probably be right among the top 4 of that list. So grab your beer if you're of age, or Bonvita if you're not, and listen to this tale of a man who was a liquor smuggler, a pimp, a rapist, a murderer, a father, a husband, a cinephile, and an auto driver.
That was quite the introduction. He was clearly a man of many talents. Even now in Periyar Nagar in Chennai, there are people who still claim he was some kind of a Robin Hood type figure and was only caught because the government changed and the police changed their alliances.
Yeah, so all that we'll see later. Let's go back to the very beginning, which is often the best place to start. Auto Shankar was not what his parents named him.
Obviously. Also, stop paraphrasing Sound of Music songs.
Okay, Snape. Let's continue.
His birth name was Gauri Shankar. He was born in 1954 in Kangayanallur, a sleepy little town in Tamil Nadu. So I looked it up, and now it's a small locality in Vellore. Yeah, like all Indian cities, Vellore seems to have swallowed up its nearby villages as well. So guys, if you're wrong, please let us know about this. So he was born in a small family, and the family was comfortable. But his childhood was going to be anything but. His trouble started quite early on in his life. His father stole the family's money and ran away to Odisha. Despite having 2 wives already, his father eloped with yet another woman. But misery seemed to haunt Gauri Shankar. A few years later, when he was a teenager, his mother eloped with her employer. This incident scarred Gauri Shankar for his entire life. His childhood was marked with negligent parenting and a lack of guidance. At a very young age, he realized that he had to fend for himself and teach himself the ways of life. Even as a child, he loved movies. Cinema was quite literally his passion. He used to save up paisa by paisa so he could buy the cheapest ticket and go watch movies in the local movie theatres in his village. They were an escape from his dreary life where he had to work to actually feed himself because oftentimes there was not enough money to even eat at home. He dreamed of the day he would grow up and move to Madras to act in movies. This thought was the ray of hope that was with him throughout his formative years. In the summer of 74, as a young, energetic man of 20, Gauri Shankar moved to Madras. He was passionate and he was ready to take on Madras. He hoped to see his pictures on those large posters in junctions and in front of movie theatres and adoring fans lining up to see his movies. But of course, he had to begin where he could. He started working as a painter. He used to paint movie posters. He found a small place to live near Periyar Nagar, but he barely managed to eke out a living. In fact, he had to take care of his younger siblings as well, who had moved to Madras to be with him. He wanted to make an honest living. He would spend a lot of nights being up late, trying to finish his commissions so that he could make enough to take care of his family. But life had other plans for Gauri Shankar.
He lasted a year on this painting job, but it was getting more and more difficult to make enough money to take care of his family. It was the end of 1974. He was unemployed, impoverished, and destitute. The beer goggles he had on when he first moved to Madras were slowly wearing off, and he was finally seeing Madras for the cutthroat city it was in 1974. Every day was a struggle. He was unable to make enough to feed his family. And one day, soon enough, the proverbial shit hit the fan. His siblings were hungry and there was no food at home. Shankar was out of options. He was never someone to beg. He did not want people's charity. The young man set out to the neighborhood grocer's shop. When he reached the area near the shop, he spent 5 minutes outside in a conundrum. He racked his brain trying to think of any other way he could make that money to buy the rice. He stood there in the Madras heat, watching men and women go to the shop and buy rice, pulses, and biscuits. He watched little boys and girls skipping to the shop and buying sweets of different colors. Then his stomach growled. His mind immediately thought of his siblings back home. Shankar realized that he was left with no choice. He swallowed his pride and slowly walked towards the shop. It was afternoon and the grocer's shop was not very busy. The grocer was a short, pudgy man who sat on a cushioned chair behind the counter. The counter was full of glass bottles filled with candies of various colors. The two women before him finished buying their groceries, and then the grocer noticed him. Shankar tried to say something, but his words were stuck in his throat. The grocer again looked at him expectantly. The man did not look like he was a regular in his shop.
You know, this is so true. Like, the grocer knows more about the comings and goings of people in a community better than anyone else.
Yeah. They're also the assholes who tell our families that we came back at 9 p.m. or that we were talking to a boy who got into which college, or at this point of our lives, who was marrying whom.
Yeah.
Anna, said Shankar hesitantly. His voice sounded scratchy and unlike his own. He tried again. He explained his situation to the grocer. As he spoke more, the grocer kept getting more and more skeptical of him. He did not get a good feeling from this strange, tall, dark man with curly hair who suddenly appeared at his shop. Shankar finally managed to request the grocer for some rice on credit to feed his hungry family. "What do you think of yourself?" shouted the grocer. "Do you think I'm running a charity? This is a business. You have to give me money and I give you rice. If you want rice for free, why don't you go sit outside a temple and beg for alms? Leave my shop." This was it. That did it. This was the last straw for Shankar. He was starving and now he was angry. He saw red. In a fit of rage, he barged into the shop and dragged the short man out and started beating the daylights out of him. He beat him black and blue for about 10 minutes. His hunger finally got the better of him. He threw the panting and groaning man aside and ransacked his shop. Petrified of this belligerent and frankly desperate looking young man, the grocer did not retaliate, nor did he file a police complaint. Shankar walked out with enough supplies to last a month.
Shankar went home happy. His sister cooked them a delicious meal. Once he finished eating, Shankar noticed the happy smiles and the satisfied faces around him. He realized that he could instill fear in others. It was that day that he decided that he should bury his dreams of becoming the hero of a movie and he should rather look for other avenues of work. He literally pivoted and proceeded on a path that he would never turn his back from.
Actually, if you think about it, it was a great time for Shankar to make this pivot in his career. It was, of course, the Prohibition era Madras. Illicit arak trade and bootlegging were the quickest way to, earn cash.
You want to quickly explain to our listeners what arak is?
Yeah. So it's an alcohol made from the sap of cocoa palm or from rice. It's usually made in India, Sri Lanka, and some other Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia. Some kinds of arak are also made from sugarcane. Okay, full disclosure, I tasted arak in Bali. Tasted like shit. So kids, do not drink if you're underage.
So after that debacle, Shankar started driving an auto. He rode all over Madras. Eventually, he started ferrying people from Madras to Mahabalipuram. These were the days back when the East Coast Road, which makes it so easy nowadays to travel to Mahabalipuram, was probably just an idea in a road planner's brain. Chennai was Madras, and it ended with Thiruvanmiyur. Thiruvanmiyur was itself seen as a remote suburb and was not within the city police limits. Madras was connected to Mahabalipuram via dirty, meandering roads filled with potholes and run-down settlements on either side. The route was dotted with tiny fishing hamlets, and the road, or whatever it was lined with palm trees along the scenic coast. Back in the day, Mahabalipuram was the hub for manufacture of illegal arak and other liquor. The villages were distillation dens for illicit liquor, and the palm trees offered scope for toddy brewing. There were no cell phones and proper logistics, hence, all consignments of arak or marijuana or toddy would have to be transported manually on the rickety road to Madras. Our ever enterprising Shankar, driven as he was, saw an opportunity. He ferried a lot of people who were themselves smuggling illegal liquor and drugs into the city. He made his contacts, and he was, after all, an affable man. He could sweet talk people and get them to do what he wanted. And soon he began smuggling arak himself. He was an auto driver and he could hide it easily in plain sight. I mean, no one would suspect a seemingly lowly rickshaw driver to do anything other than ferry people from point to point in Madras.
I am deeply suspicious and slightly scared of auto drivers. Nope, not because I'm scared that they will commit crimes and whatnot, but simply because they will refuse to put on the meter and then ask me to write away my house in their name or give them my entire bank balance to drop me at a place that is around
I know. It's
5
very
kilometers
frustrating.
from where I am. Or just refuse to even acknowledge my presence when I ask them to drop me home from the metro station. Also, case in point, Chennai has the craftiest of auto drivers. They will fleece you out of all the money you have. They will pretend to not understand Hindi or English and they'll take you in the longest possible route. So that was basically experiences that I've had growing up going to Chennai. Anyway, thank fuck for Uber right now.
Okay, so this is making me wary of all auto drivers. Every single time I get into an auto from now on, I will try to avoid thinking of what double life they may be leading. Anyway, let's get back to the story. So Shankar was surprisingly good at his new job. Finally, he seemed to have found his calling. Within a matter of months, he became a prominent bootlegger. He had made good contacts and he knew where to get the best illegal liquor and he knew the best routes to avoid being caught by the police. In a few months, he had a small gang of people who were helping him run his operation. Ravi, Rajaram, and Jayavel were his accomplices, or rather his associates, who later became his accomplices. During these bootlegging runs from Madras to Mahabalipuram, Shankar quickly realized that there was another new trade he could try his hand at: Madras's booming flesh trade. He noticed that there were a lot of times when he transported sex workers to Mahabalipuram. He realized that he could form long term connections with brothels and transport the women to and from Mahabalipuram. To widen his profits, he even started to ferry sex workers at various places in Madras.
But whenever he drove someone to Mahabalipuram, he would make sure to smuggle back arak into Madras. This was how he got the name which he would become most well known as Auto Shankar. Soon, Shankar realized that becoming a full time pimp was more profitable and less risky than the illicit liquor trade. So, he decided to hand over the reins of his crazily successful illicit liquor business to his younger brother Mohan. But Mohan was still young. He needed guidance and help. Unfortunately, because of his new ventures, he would be unable to hold Mohan's hand and help him through the motions. That's when an idea struck him. his mind immediately went to his friend Babu. Well, it would be a little bit of stretch to call him a friend, but Shankar decided to let bygones be bygones and give Babu a chance.
Who is this Babu character now?
One of the many supporting characters in the saga that was Otto Shankar's life. So, this guy, however, plays a very unmistakably pivotal and crucial role and was quite the character, as you will come to see. So, Babu was originally from Kotivakam, which was another suburb of Madras, and was a mason. He was forced into the job by his father, and frankly, he sucked at it. Because of that, he was unable to get steady jobs, and so he decided to hire an auto and start driving. This auto was actually given to him by his father. But soon, this auto met with an accident.
This guy is such a train wreck.
Seriously. But unfettered, he leased another auto and managed to hang on long enough to purchase it. At that time, his father was constructing a house in Palavakkam village where his dad was also a mason. When he used to go visit his father, he became a good friend of Otto Shankar. He also met Mohan and Ravi, Shankar's other associates and brother. At this point, Shankar had already started selling arak. Soon, largely because he missed spending time with his new friends, Babu gave up his auto again and started working in Palavakkam as a mason full time.
Wait, so are you telling me that this guy gave up his steady auto because of FOMO?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. So, once the construction was finished, Babu was effectively unemployed. He soon realized he was going to be broke. Then he started his own illegal arak business.
So he started his own competing business against a friend.
Yeah,
Bad friend, Babu. You're a terrible friend.
sweetie, this is only going to get worse from now. I mean, first it'll get better, and then it'll careen downhill so rapidly that it'll put the best roller coasters to shame. Metaphor 110 on 100.
Yeah.
Of course, Shankar found out. He was seething. He thought Babu was his friend. How dare he do this? Of course, our man went to confront him. And predictably, things got ugly. So ugly that the police had to intervene.
Really, don't the police have any shame? They are literally going to help mitigate a dispute which arose because of the illegal trade of illicit liquor.
If you think about it, it shows how much of an influence Shankar had over the local police. It is actually not an unforeseen possibility. He had to have been greasing palms to carry out his business. Because at some point or the other, he would need the police to turn a blind eye to his auto rides. So, anyway, the matter was compromised. Friends became friends again. In 1984, Babu got married, and Shankar and his gang attended the wedding. Again, fate had other plans for Babu. In 1985, he was convicted for the murder of one Natesa Nadar. A few days later, he was released on bail. It was at this time that Shankar was thinking of finding someone to help his brother and thought of Babu. Shankar knew Babu was unemployed and helpless, so he convinced him to work with his brother Mohan. Shankar also warned Babu that his main loyalties lied with Shankar, that if ever he had to choose between Mohan and Shankar, he would always choose Shankar. So now, Shankar was in the middle of making serious plans to start his own brothel. However, he needed a place of business. For some time, he was eyeing this piece of government land in Periyar Nagar. It seemed like the perfect place to start his venture. A few days later, Shankar and his associates, including Babu, encroached the land by going there and pitching a shed. A few days later, they found out who the owner was, and please, I'm using this word very broadly, purchased, quote unquote, the land from them.
What a nice and sophisticated way to describe threatening someone and then offering a lowball amount to buy off their land.
The only thing here is it could have been like a no-ball offer. Like, you give me land and I'll let you live types.
Amazing.
So, according to the sources, the land was sold to Shankar for 10,000 rupees, which I'm assuming even at that time was grossly under value because it was government land.
Yeah.
And he gave 6,000 to the owner of the land and he gave 4,000 to Babu to handle his murder case expenses, thus cementing Babu's place in the gang. Wow.
Murder case expenses. I didn't know you could put that in your expense accounts. Anyway, now in that land, Otto Shankar started his first brothel. It was basically a shed. He hired a bevy of sex workers. He gave them colorful names like Banu, Kundu, Vijaya, Asthini, Begum, Viji, and so on and so forth. Since then, they've all told the police that he treated them well. In this business, he was assisted by Eldin, Shivaji, Selvaraj, Sasi, and Sudalai.
Wait, where did I hear Sudalai?
Oh, yeah, he has quite the role to play in the story. So, he was the dead body that was burning in our cold opening. But before that, we have a lot of story to cover, so just keep this in mind, right? And we'll
Yeah,
get to him
yeah.
later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shankar's brothel became quite popular in the area. His women were clean, and very surprisingly, his premises were hygienic. He had a network of pimps to screen and bring women to the brothel. Shankar's brothel attracted a lot of prominent people as clients, which is important to remember for later. In a matter of a few years, Shankar went from being someone who had to beg for rice to running literally two successful businesses. Businesses being used very loosely here. But Shankar was not without his faults. He had a roving eye. He kept a strict eye on his brothel, but he never shied away from, quote, sampling the merchandise, unquote, which is a
You.
yeah.
Sorry, Aditi. I got carried away and wrote it. I was feeling like all writer like and stuff.
No, Sneha, do not do that. Nope, never. If he liked a girl, he went for it. Whenever a good looking woman or someone caught his fancy, he would seduce them and take them as his mistress. Shankar was wily and protective of his things, mistresses included. And women, when we say things, we're just highlighting the fact that he treated women like objects. That was just how we approached them, right?
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
He kept his mistresses in another house. In 1986, he married Sumati. He saw her and sweet talked her into falling in love with him, then eventually seduced her and began to sleep with her. He also made her his wife. He wrote about this in his diary. So obviously, Jagdishwari, who was his first wife, was pissed with this new development. One day, when he came home, she confronted him. She created a ruckus and threatened to leave him, and Shankar promptly slapped her. The next day, Shankar went to Sumati and asked her to pack her bags. Sumati did so immediately. Shankar took her in his auto to Marutishwar Nagar, where he had set up another house for her.
Wow, Casanova.
Really. So, for a while, his attention was all on Sumati. He began to ignore Jagdishwari, but he still continued to send her money and ensured that she was living comfortably. But this did not last long.
One day, he was in the brothel going over accounts with Shashi, the accountant. They were in the middle of deciding what else they could add to the premises to fleece more money from their clients when Shankar saw her. She was tall and slender and carried herself with grace. Who's this? He asked Shashi. Shashi knew he had lost his boss's attention for the day. It's Vijaya, sir. She's new. No, take her off the roster. She's coming with me. That day, after a few hours, he took Vijaya home to that house at Marutishwara Nagar. For a while, he was attentive to her. He was careful with her. Then began the torture. He used to burn her with cigarettes. Soon, Vijaya had burn marks on her shoulder, her neck, her arms. He told her that it was his mark on her. As each month passed, the torture had become worse. In the middle, he even married her. One day, Vijaya realized that she had had enough. She had to get out of this. She cannot stay another day in this hellhole. But who would help her though? Sumati was too devoted to Shankar, and if she even got a whiff of her plan, Sumati would rat her out to that monster. His thugs guarded the house closely, or they were always loitering the streets near the house. But one day, an opportunity came. She was cleaning the house when she realized that the main gate to the house was open and none of the thugs were guarding the house. They had all gone to Mahabalipuram to buy more arak. Sumati was upstairs in the middle of doing her puja.
Vijaya realized that she had nothing to lose. Her heart was pounding as she quickly opened the main gate and walked into the crowded street and got lost in the bustling Chennai crowd.
Wow, go Vijaya.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad she walked out.
Seriously, I wish all women who are in abusive relationships get that strength to walk away.
So later that night, it was Sumiti who bore the brunt of Shankar's wrath. She was the one who got raped. He burned her back with his cigarettes. It took a few months for things to turn to relative normalcy in Periyar Nagar. Shankar was content. The brothel was running itself well, and Mohan and Babu were on the top of the illicit liquor business. Then Shankar saw Gauri. She was a new joinee in the brothel at Periyar Nagar. She caught his fancy literally on the first day she started working for him. When she was about to go to a client, he called her and told her that he would marry her and take care of her forever. The next day, he married her in a small ceremony, and their only attendee was Sumati.
Bro, क्या चल रहा है? Are we listening to sister wives?
Is this legal? It can't be legal, right? At this point?
No, no.
He's just. Okay. Imagine how tortured Sumati or how scared she must have been to be able to tolerate all this. I mean, I don't know at this point whether she was just brainwashed, whether it was Stockholm syndrome,
Yeah.
or she was just too abused to do anything about it, you know? And also, what is the scene with Jagdishwari? I'm slowly losing track of all the names. I mean, I think we should make a diagram explaining Shankar and all the women he's abused.
Yeah, totally. And I I will try and make it. We'll release it sometime within this week. So, because there are more names to come, Aditi.
Wow.
So the newly married couple were happy for a bit. Shankar treated Gauri well for a few days. He often used to tease her, saying that both their names were Gauri. This gave him another idea. One day, he took her to a tattoo artist and got his name tattooed on her right hand. Her hand read Gauri Shankar. He also got Gauri tattooed on his hand. He told her that they both belonged to each other.
Good to see a criminal mastermind also behaving like an 18-year-old dude bro.
But of course, a few days later, he turned violent with her. He began to abuse her, ill treat her, and you guessed it, he used to burn her with cigarettes. One night, when everyone was asleep, Sumati ran away.
Please tell me this is the last woman he quote unquote married.
No, nope, not even close. It's amazing how he thinks that no law applies to him.
Yeah, his arrogance is just astounding.
Okay, let's continue. In June 1987, Shankar moved Sumati to the house of Bommi Ammal. It was a big house at Kalakshetra Road. Remember Sudalai? He let this guy and his wife Durga stay in another portion of the same house. Shankar asked his other associate Eldon and his wife to move into the third portion of this house. Just to clarify, Eldon was married to Shankar's younger sister.
Oh my god. Do you think he made them all move into one house so that they can keep an eye on the women he brought in? Like this was some kind of sick version of a wife prison because two of his previous wives ran away?
Damn, son, I did not think of that. But this makes a fuck ton of sense.
Mind blown, no?
Seriously, Aditi, wow. I like how your mind is functioning. And also, this evil guy is just plain old evil. So, by now, Shankar was making great money. He had good contacts, the local police, and also the local politicians were in his pocket. So, like all good South Indians, he constructed a new house at Periyar Nagar. He even had a housewarming ceremony. It was attended by his associates and some of the women who worked for him. There was food and there was drink. All in all, it was quite the celebration for everyone there. The photo albums from these celebrations were submitted as evidence in the murder cases that would be filed against him. We'll obviously tell you more about this in the next episode. In this house, Shankar's first wife, Jagadishwari, lived with his children. Shankar divided his time between this house and the house in Kalakshetra Road. Soon, he would make another addition to that house. Aditi, there's a fun fact.
Yeah.
So, remember the house in Kalakshetra Road?
Yes.
The owner was someone called Bommi Ammal, right?
Okay.
She was the person from whom he purchased the land.
Oh, quote unquote purchased, you mean?
Yes.
Amazing.
Which was, by the way, classified as government land, even though, but somehow papers were produced showing that she was the owner, and then he just purchased it from her.
Awesome. I'm learning so much about property law in this case.
No, don't learn this. This is not what you're supposed to learn. Anyway, so, and soon he would make another addition to that house. A few days later, he married Sundari, and the same pattern repeated, only this time with tragic result. After she came to know about this woman too, Jagadishwari used to go all the way to this house and scream and fight with Sundari. Sundari was quite literally caught between a rock and a hard place. Unable to bear the torture or figure out a way to escape the gilded prison she was incarcerated in, Sundari immolated herself. This time, Shankar just turned a blind eye to this and continued his businesses. I have no idea what to say at this point.
Yeah, this is all very tragic.
And he also made plans to expand his businesses. His brothel was in good demand. He brought in 10 more women and opened another brothel. That was when he met Lalita. They were both attracted to each other, and their affair started almost immediately. He married her and moved her into the house at Kalakshetra Nagar. Jagadishwari used to fight with Lalita as well. In fact, she tried to warn Lalita, but Lalita was smitten with him and did not pay heed to what Jagadishwari said.
Big mistake.
Jagadishwari used to fight with Shankar, saying that he was giving away all the money to that siren Lalita. But soon, Lalita, like the other women, was also beginning to see the monster that hid behind the veneer of a caring lover.
It was during these times that she started to talk to Sudalai, who was living in another portion of the same house. Slowly, they became good friends, and she used to confide in Sudalai. This soon blossomed into love, and they realized that they needed to be together.
Wait, wasn't he married?
Not only was he married, but also he was living with his wife in the same damn house. Also, when has being married stopped anyone in this entire story?
Oh my god, the 80s were wild. But in all seriousness, it looks like the relationship was sort of inevitable. I don't know.
Mm. So one day, Sudalai barged into the house. Lalita was alone. He asked her to quickly pack her bags. And while she was packing, he went into the room where Shankar put his money in a safe. Of course, there was a safety dial. Shankar loved himself, and he probably put his birthday as the password. Sudalai turned the dial slowly, and voila, the door clicked open. There was some money and a new Polaroid camera. Sudalai swept all of them into his bag and met Lalita, and together they ran away. When Shankar found out, he lost his shit. He began a manic search for Sudalai and Lalita. Raghu drove their car, and Shankar, along with Mohan, Eldin, and Shivaji, travelled in search of Sudalai and Lalita. "Let me find them," he said angrily, when they stopped for tea on the way to Bangalore. He even lodged a police complaint. The local police who were in his pocket began to search for Lalita immediately. One day, they did find her. The Palleshwaram police brought in Lalita. They handed her over to Shankar and his gang. Lalita was begging the police to let her go. She tried to tell them what Shankar had done to her, but no one listened.
When they reached the house, Shankar dragged her by her hair into a room and beat her senseless till she was black and blue. He then raped her and murdered her. This was Shankar's first murder. He was seething with rage. He still had to find that traitor Sudalai and take care of him. Yeah, I think, guys, we can stop here. We can stop here for this week, right, Aditi?
Yeah.
So, next week, we'll tell you about all the details of Otto Shankar's other crimes and how he, quote unquote, took care of Sudalai. So, how did you like this episode? Let us know on our socials. Click the subscribe or follow button wherever you listen to us. If you have an Apple device, please leave us a rating and a review. It'll help us a lot. And as usual, we'll share the review on our socials, positive or negative. And in case you have an unknown story you want us to cover, please write to us at khunipodcast@gmail.com. We are getting an incredible amount of suggestions, and thank you so much, guys. Also, we are starting a YouTube channel. Find the link on all our socials.
We'll see you all next week.
Have a great week, guys, and happy Ugadi to whoever celebrates it.
Bye.
Bye bye.